it's not forgiveness for them. It's forgiveness for you to be able to move forward.
Welcome to the Council of Dudes podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Brusco. I am a father, a husband, the founder of Agora Social Club, a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a certified life coach, and a facilitator of the Council of Dudes men's group. This podcast is here to help you tap into and follow your golden thread, that feeling that pulls you forward to become the best version of yourself. If you're someone who's into personal development and self-help and is looking to live a life of more alignment, then this is the podcast for you. Subscribe to the channel, click the notification button, and follow along on the journey of the show.
Hey, this is Justin Carotti, and you're checking out the Council of Dudes podcast.
And here we go.
All right. So thanks for doing this, man.
It's a pleasure to be here, man.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me out.
We met through good old Mike Reef.
Yes, sir. So we were training at the CrossFit gym, and he's like, dude, there's this guy who looks just like...
Do you get that a lot because you have a beard? It's like, oh, you have a beard, so you're just like my other friend. You're like, yeah.
Bro, you guys would hit it off. You guys would hit it off. And he told me a little bit about the stuff that you got going on in Agora. And given the work that I do, I was like super inspired just to kind of check you guys out. And, obviously we hit it off a little bit, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And shout out to Mike Reef for making the connection. So you're a mental health therapist, but you primarily work with men.
Yeah, so I own Valiance Counseling and Coaching, which is based in Milford, Connecticut. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so yes, mental health therapist. I'm also a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. Myself specifically, primarily work with men. As a practice, we see both men and women. But yeah, for me specifically, I tend to work with men. I've been working with men for over a decade in the mental health space.
What made you get into, because that's like my unicorn dream job as therapist / psychologist. So what made you get into, because anybody can be a therapist, but there's a calling to it, right? There's like, even being, when I was going to get my master's, there's an energy that you could dial into when you're in therapy, right? As the therapist, that is very different than just showing up to a job. Like, it's a real commitment. So what caused you, or what brought you to becoming a therapist?
I've always been drawn to helping people. I've also gotten feedback since I was as early as like in middle school, that I've been a good listener and attending to people. I've had interest in psychology for a really long time, like how people think, how people act, the reasons behind those things. And so just sort of the natural evolution of my career, I would just followed my interests when I was in undergraduate school, pursued psychology, social work, anthropology, the sort of the softer social sciences, and then naturally saw this progression post-grad into graduate school and beyond, where I could actually make a career out of this, getting to know people. I consider it a real privilege, even kind of conversations like this. We get to know each other on a pretty intimate way, an intimate way. And especially in my position as a therapist, it's privileged dialogue, right? So we get access to human beings, their real world. And so to me, I always thought that was such a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
And then to be able to make a difference. And then the natural evolution from there too, Vinny, just to be able to work with men. I worked for juvenile probation for a while and saw that I had sort of a access point to young men at a critical juncture in their life where it seemed to really make a difference for them. And I gravitated towards that work, have always gravitated to that work. It seems like it's been reciprocal. Men seem to reciprocate that, want to work with me. And so kind of away I went from there. But yeah, I think it's the opportunity to have access to people in a way that I don't think ordinarily we would be able to in a day-to-day kind of dialogue that I see as a real privilege.
Yeah, moving past the water cooler conversation of things
100%.
has been obviously a real integral part of just building this. I mean, that's how it kind of started, was just the people I call it the stepbrothers hug conversation, where you're kind of like, I don't know how to talk to you other than how was the Knicks game, right? It really seems to lend itself to what people are seeking. And I think it also is something that a lot of men don't know how to have. And then when you have a guy like yourself who's got a beard, does CrossFit, but is in touch with this side of himself and with others that's kind of unconventional as a man, it opens up the opportunity for other guys to go, oh, okay, this is okay to talk like this. It's okay to dive into my feelings, into my emotions, and experience these things.
Yeah. there's no question. Part of what I like about what I've done, the kind of person I've become, is that you don't see me as a therapist on the surface.
Right.
So I'm a little bit of an enigma when you see me in the CrossFit space or you see me walking on the street. I don't think your first assessment of me is that I'm a therapist.
Right.
And I actually like that because I feel like I'm breaking the mold and as a result, allowing people access into the reality and a more intimate kind of discussion that you're referencing, right? Like if I on the street don't get recognized as a therapist, but in conversation we can have those deep dialogues, that means you can too, right? And so, again, just the ability to enter into those discussions doesn't have to be super scary. And I think it's trying to like destigmatize that for men.
Yeah.
I think we have this stereotype of what psychotherapy means. I've always sort of talked about like, I'm not going to be a doctor, right? I'm not a doctorate level psychiatrist. I'm more down to earth. I'm approachable, or at least try to be approachable. We try to make this palatable and real while also being sophisticated and trained and licensed. You know, this is not brotherly work, right? This is still a professional job, and we can still make it approachable, right? It doesn't have to be super intimidating.
It can be both things at once, right?
Of course.
I think that's one of the bigger confusions from the outside looking, because there is a lot of clinical aspects to being a therapist. It was one of the biggest turnoffs that I was talking to a mentor of mine. I was like, I know you want to be a therapist. He's like, but like all the clinical, all the nonsense, it's like, it's such red tape in a lot of ways on both sides, both from the client perspective and the therapist perspective. There's so much red tape tied into that it could be a complete major turnoff on both sides.
Yes. Well, so let's talk about from the client's perspective, right? I think the stereotype is the Freudian psychology. So like you sit on the couch or you lay on the couch.
Right.
And you have this older therapist ask you deep questions about your childhood traumas.
Right.
Okay. Plenty of space, plenty of room for that traditional psychodynamic therapeutic work to be had in the space of psychotherapy. In my opinion, I've often talked about this. I taught graduate students in social work. It's like we need as many social workers and therapists as possible because we need people doing psychodynamic work and people working with disenfranchised folks in other ways in the community. Great. For me, what resonates for me is not that, right? It's the ability to have sophisticated conversations around mood, substances, relationships, systemic challenges, developmental challenges, periods in your life when you're going from high school to college, college to postgrad to life, fatherhood, things like that. We need to be able to make space for those kinds of discussions, being clinically informed, diagnostically conceptualizing what's happening, and also be able to speak in like layman's terms,
right,
without bright white lights of a hospital shining down on you.
Right.
Right. And so I think there's a way to split the difference. And there's no disparaging either side, right? Again, we need people doing deep level, highly sophisticated clinical work in hospital settings and other settings like that. And I also think from what we do at Valiance, because we're coaches, because we're high performers, because we perform at a high level personally and professionally, we're targeting a specific niche of the population, which sort of gravitates to that kind of discussion and that kind of provider.
Yeah, I think it's a good on-ramp to a much deeper conversation. You know, but I think there is something intrinsically important about that traditional Freudian psychology, right? The Jungian psychology, right? There's something that it is all very, very deep. The layers of the person, the self, the psyche, the consciousness is a very deep experience. And it's important to be able to touch on those things, but in a very kind of throwing out the jab, because especially with men, we're more resistant to tapping into that.
Yes.
But once you all of a sudden start to go and pull on those strings, you really start to unfold things. You really start to really get to the root of the problem versus kind of just trimming the branches of the tree. And I think a lot of talk therapy ends up trimming the branches of the tree, but you really have to get into the depths of things in order to really solve the problem and show up in a new way. And now, you know, walk through life with a totally different like lens.
Yeah. So you're totally correct in the sense that I think part of the reason that psychotherapy and therapists get a bad rap is what I call like Baskin-Robbins therapy, which is like just flavor of the week type stuff.
Right.
Just trimming the branches.
Right.
You come in, you talk about your week, we say, how can we work through that? Or we problem solve through that. You go out, you kind of have a sense of what to do, but then the next week it's the same problem or a different problem.
Right.
And you're not really moving the needle. So for me and how we operate at Valiance, it's very important that we're conceptualizing patterns. How a person does anything is usually how they do everything. And so we start to string together how a person talks about their life. I have been trained in systemic work. So I tend to think about things through systems, how a person integrates with their community, with their family, what influences their decisions at a systemic level, how do we build balance in a life and our relationships. And so given that purview, we can think about, okay, how are those patterns of behavior impacting their ability to function across these dynamic areas of functioning. So let's say their behavior in terms of their workplace and behavior in terms of their relationship, behavior in terms of how they integrate with themselves and what they believe in. What do they find purposeful and meaningful in their life? So yeah, we're talking about childhood when it's relevant. Of course, childhood attachment is incredibly important. More and more work is being done, at least on my end, and bringing that into the fold. And it doesn't have to take up all the space. I like your analogy of like jabs, right? There's the ability to ask open-ended questions that get to a person's understanding of themselves through different phases of their life, childhood, adolescent, younger adulthood, into adulthood. As we ask questions and understand their world, we can start to make hypotheses or what's called clinical conceptualizations around how that's maybe informing how they got to where they are, right?
Yeah. The reverse engineering of the self has been such a huge part of my own personal journey, whether it be with my parents, my wife, and anybody that I interact with. It's really giving them the benefit of the doubt and understanding and conceptualizing the fact that they're showing up in this very moment with a unimaginable amount of ties and connections and emotions and experiences that are all they're still tethered to in some way, shape, or form, which has brought them to be the person that they are now. And unless you can start to do that with yourself and understand, I'm making these decisions, I'm showing up in this way because of X, Y, and Z, it's a lot harder to give other people that grace.
Oh, that's totally correct. I like the idea of tethering. I use the analogy of anchored.
Yeah.
You sort of, and a lot of this operates at the subconscious. I mean, even for me, right? It's like I would have to really be self-evaluative to understand what are the things that happened in my childhood that probably influenced the way in which I think today. And even as a trained psychotherapist, I can be pretty self-reflective for sure, but there's going to be areas that I'm missing. And so the degree to sit down in the room with another person like myself, or even in the conversations that you guys have at Agora, is the opportunity to see how other people see you, provide a level of objectivity, sensitively, empathetically, and also just work through that together without any judgment.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, these things influence how we think. It influences my perspective, influences how I'm behaving, influences my relationships. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. There's no judgment associated with it, but aren't you better off at knowing it?
Right.
Because then you could do something with it or not.
Right.
It's better to know it.
Well, that goes back to, I've spoken about this a bunch of times before, but you were talking about sensory deprivation. And for me, the catalyst for me was I want to do it. And I was hesitant. And I thought to myself, why are you holding back? What's in the way? And instantly what came up was, I'm afraid of what I'm going to think. And then immediately I was like, well, you're thinking it no matter what. Those thoughts are happening subconsciously. So either you're going to interface with them and you're going to look at them and you're going to be able to, again, just interact with them. Just be able to say, okay, like this is a fear, this is a hope, this is an aspiration, this makes me cry, this makes me laugh. All of these things are still part of who I am, but I need to learn how to interact with these things. I need to learn how to have conversation and dialogue with these different emotional experiences and say, it's all part of me, but it doesn't make me who I am.
That's right. And if you look into, I'm not super familiar with this, but from my general understanding of internal family systems.
I was just going to ask you about that because you said that you're a systems guy.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, are you privy with like obviously internal family systems and things like that?
Yeah. So I was formerly trained as a multidimensional family therapist. So really the backdrop on that is when working for juvenile probation, we were trying to lower recidivism into the juvenile justice system. And so the working theory at the time was that if we could engage with families,
right,
rather than just the client or person who's in juvenile probation, we would help them lower recidivism. So very purposeful in engaging families while the client was at residential. And so what I've done just in terms of that formal training is brought that into my work today. There's a lot more stuff we can get into theoretically. I'm big on motivational interviewing as an example. But in terms of internal family systems work.
Well, explain what that is first so people who don't know.
So motivational interviewing?
Well, the internal family system.
Yeah. So again, broad brush.
Yeah. But
I don't know it fully, but the idea being we all have different parts of ourselves, right? So this is pretty popularized today. I think a lot of celebrities talk about this. Like I'm doing childhood work or getting to know my childlike self. So there's this version of ourselves, if you think about normal human development and maturation, from 0 to 5 is pretty critical in terms of understanding the safety and predictability of your environment at an unconscious relational level. So I have a 6-month-old. She's just understanding the environment. And when she's crying, she's sort of not consciously understanding, is mom and dad going to be there, right? It's not like she's thinking, I cried for 5 minutes. Is Justin coming? Is dad coming? It's like, no, it's not going through her head. She's just feeling it. It's a highly relational period of life.
Right.
And so if you're not attended to predictably, consistently, safely, sensitively, you're making unconscious or subconscious appraisals of your environment's safety and predictability for you. So that's 0 to 5.
And that's just on a very, lack of a better term, animalistic, humanistic, without any type of depth of knowledge, but just survival.
Correct.
If you build, he will come.
The point is, don't lose your dinosaur.
Because what do all parents of adolescents talk about, right? Your brain's not fully formed, Your brain's not fully formed until you're 21. Well, the reason that they're saying that is, I think, to your point, Vinny, is the idea that early development, the early maturation of the brain is focused primarily on safety and getting your needs met, right? And so, like, making sure you can eat, making sure you can sleep, making sure you can use the bathroom, right? Like
Right.
other things. Make sure you can get your needs met emotionally. So especially 0 to 5, if I'm having trouble with my emotions, the only thing to be able to do to regulate that is through my environment with my parental caregivers. Like that's how emotions get regulated. Babies come with all the emotions, kids come with all the emotions, but no playbook on how to handle it. The way that they know how to handle it is through their caregivers. So through that IFS model, part of what we're understanding is that there is a period in your life where you are being attended to or cared for that was not in your control. You didn't have any say, but you were still experiencing it, right? From 0 to 5, it was still happening to you. And then from 5 to 12, that's another pretty important developmental period. You could break that down a little bit more nuanced if you want, but just generally speaking, you're developing more autonomy, more independence, right? I kind of use the metaphor of kid at the playground who looks to make sure mom's there before he tries something. Like, is it cool if I go do on the monkey bars? And mom gives him like the head nod or waves and he does it, right? It's the ability to develop autonomy. When kids don't have these sort of moments of progression in terms of their maturation, it's not like, oh my God, it's a crisis, right? Nothing bad, crazy happens, but it does start to shape their perspective and their worldview and how they start to integrate and understand themselves in those spaces. And a lot of the stuff that I do with men, going back to internal family systems kind of work, is if we were to understand that there was a period of time where men were not attended to during moments of fear, moments of shame, moments of embarrassment, moments of sadness, that's sort of the colloquial or stereotypical way of understanding men's maturation is like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have to work harder, do more, all that kind of phraseology, which suggests to the man that, hey, look, there is no place for this emotion. You know, if you did something and you performed poorly and you felt ashamed, but rather than being supported and empathized and sensitively cared for during that moment of shame, you were ridiculed. What is that 10-year-old going to internalize?
Right.
There's not going to be like, oh, you know, mom's really wrong there, right? They're gonna be like, oh, there's something that I did that no longer is acceptable on the emotional spectrum of what my parents can handle. I'm going to internalize that.
But that's a key element into right there is what my parents could handle, because we're all only at our capacities, right?
Yes.
So unless you do start to look at the people around you, your family, and say, oh, this person or that person showed up in a way that they were best suited for at that time based off of who they are and everything that's brought them to where they are, unless you can change that and understand that conceptually, but then also internalize that and truly feel that. Because, you know, on the Scantron test, you might fill that bubble in, but unless you really do feel that, it's kind of just hyperbole.
And it's so hard, right? So just to close the loop on internal family systems, there's a bunch of parts of us who I talked a little bit about 0 to 5, 5 to 12, but there's a lot of other parts. And so it attends to those. To your last point there, it's super important because I think a lot of times, especially men, are resistant, understandably so, to address that level of vulnerability. It's a wound relationally.
Yeah.
And so to uncover that and to pick at it, it's like picking at a scab, right?
Oh, really?
We're going into a place that no one really feels super comfortable going into. And then even then, in that moment of vulnerability, the old patterns of how they've dealt with shame will show up, right? So like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm handling it. There's a level of stoicism.
Sure.
There's a level of personal responsibility. There's a level of like just sort of machismo. I'm handling it. All of which I get. It's
of
a
course.
response to pain.
Yeah.
As we get to that, we sort of try to make sense of childhood trauma or relational traumas or challenges in these kind of like key periods of development by saying, can we make space for it to non-judgmentally just view it as painful? Can we accept it as painful? And can we not justify how you were treated? Because in most cases, when we're talking about childhood trauma, it's extremely painful, potentially even violent, potentially really, really detrimental and crushing. We're never going to justify how that happened to you, right? It was completely unfair, unjustifiable. If we could go back, we wish we would be able to go back, but we can't go back. But can we build in a level of forgiveness? And forgiveness is a gift to the client, not to the person.
Right.
So I think that's sometimes misconstrued, where someone will think, can you just forgive that person? And in this context, we'd be saying, can you forgive mom or can you forgive dad? It's not forgiveness for them. It's forgiveness for you to be able to move forward. Which is,
what does that look like though? Because I understand it, right? Conceptually, I totally follow what you're saying there, because it's like the old poison, right? Like you're drinking your own poison, like you're drinking the poison, right?
Sure.
By not forgiving them or having that hate in your heart, as much as it may feel validated and vindicated and all of these things, there is a layer that's still bogging you down and preventing you from being healthier emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever it may be. But what does that actually look like for someone who struggles with forgiving someone, right? Because in theory, when we're children, it's like, oh, just apologize. Oh, I forgive you. And we all move on. But when it's on a deeper emotional level, and knowing that, and you're explaining that forgiveness is not for that person, it's for you. What is that doing and how is that showing up and what does it actually look like?
Well, it's based off your point around Scantron, right? Because what we're not doing is checking the box.
Right. And
what you tell your 10-year-old kid, can you forgive that person? Yeah, I forgive that person. That's checking the box. Can you say sorry? Yes, I
is that a disservice to children to have them forgiven that way? Because my daughter's 10, my son is 6, so we're always forgiving each other in the house. Right?
Look, I don't. So
can you get listen? My daughter's a very deep thinker, but I do wonder if teaching them to forgive at that level, right, and that capacity at that age has a long-term benefit versus just going forgive them. Right.
Well, yeah, I'm in no position to like give parental guidance in the moment. Like, I think parents are trying the best that they can.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So on the spectrum of should you ask for forgiveness or not ask for forgiveness, of course, I think forgiveness is a good thing.
Yeah.
Whether or not the kid internalizes the deeper lesson is it's part of the conversation, right?
Sure, but I think it should be though, because again, being a parent, how often do you just dismiss forgiveness to whomever, right? A kid in class or whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be this forgiveness of like you go up to him and say I forgive you, but just an understanding of moving past it, right, is a form of forgiveness. But I think also explaining, and this is real time parenting for me. I'm thinking that explaining that in forgiving this person, it's really doing yourself a favor.
Yeah, because tied to the point I was making around like we're not justifying what happened, right? So oftentimes the most profound examples of forgiveness that I can think about are moments where are you familiar with the United States women's gymnastics team where they were sexually assaulted?
Yes.
Okay. So
I was going to say Jesus, but we can go with that one too. I mean,
so they had
Jesus on the cross is a pretty big one. But continue.
They have the perpetrator. I can't remember his name right now. But
coach, right? It was
it was the trainer. It was the physical trainer, I believe. He's in the courtroom as the perpetrator, and you have the victims of his sexual assault looking at the perpetrator, saying a version of, "I will never, ever, ever forgive you for this, but I will forgive you for what's happened broadly because it's taught me a greater lesson." Right. So I'm not going to justify what happened. It was completely heinous,
right,
unacceptable behavior, but I will forgive you for the fact that this happened and this was the best that you could have shown up as. Like,
well, it's almost forgiving them for the person that they are.
Yes, right. Because even if you think about another profound example is when a mother forgives someone who murders their son. That's right. It's like that's a gift to that mom so that she can move forward.
But again, from the outside looking in, how is it a gift?
It's a gift to you.
Right.
So now this gets your earlier questions. Like, okay, practically, how do we actually do this? Well, the thing that we can't skip over is the pain.
Mm.
And this is what I think gets missed and where we make space in the therapeutic environment. In order for you to truly be able to understand, in this instance where we talk about parents, that they were just doing the best that they could, or that this is the best that they could have been, you need to deeply have room for empathy, which means you have to make space for your own pain because you were mistreated. In a lot of cases, the women on the United States gymnastics team, years of therapy to be able to be in that room, right? Years of reprocessing and understanding and appreciating that the guilt and shame that they felt as victims was not their fault, right? It's not their fault. They didn't deserve this treatment. That is incredibly difficult work. So it's not, okay, write it on a piece of paper and forgive this person, because then to your point, it's a scantron, it won't be internalized. The most challenging, most difficult, most complex work that has to be done is getting next to the pain that it caused you so that you can work through it. Part of what trauma does is it sort of circumvents the full cycle of healing. It just cuts it off. So as you're sad or as you're feeling guilty or as you're feeling shameful, you don't go through the full pain cycle. You don't get the healing. It just cuts it.
It's frozen.
It's frozen. So what we try to do is we try to, let's say, unfreeze it, right? And we try to make tremendous space, client-centered space, permission. You know, the client leads the way in this work, trauma-informed work. We try to make a lot of room for them to allow that process to unfold. And that could be quite literally years. And it may not actually end up resulting in a face-to-face forgiveness dialogue like we were talking about. I think his name is Larry Nassar. Now it comes to my mind. We're not talking about standing in a courtroom looking your perpetrator in the face. In some cases, your parents are dead. There's no one to actually tell this to. So what do you do in that circumstance? Well, you still need to create a story or a narrative that allows you to move forward. And that's the gift, is it says, I will never understand or make sense of this experience. I don't think it was ever justified. I didn't deserve it. My 5-year-old self couldn't have done anything about it. But in order for me to live my life and move forward, I have to forgive you for doing whatever it is that you did. That was the best that you could have done, even though it was atrocious and poor, so that I can move forward in my life. And a lot of those women on the U.S. gymnastics team would say, like, it's made them who they are today. And that, to me, is the true 360 version of traumatic healing, is you take a story of victimization, guilt, and shame and turn it into a story of overcoming. Right. That's when you know a person's come out on the other side.
Yeah, the trauma freezes the firing, right, of the brain. That's where like EMDR comes in and like neurological studies and stuff like that, where you're kind of moving the trauma from the left to the right hemisphere of the brain to kind of keep it in that cycle of healing and managing through.
So we don't do EMDR at Valiance. So eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, the concept is that this is very bastardized, so just go with me, but you have the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the front part of the brain, which is doing all the executive functioning, the planning, the organizing, delayed gratification, all the adult stuff. When you go to the grocery store and you're like, which cereal do I need to buy? It's your prefrontal cortex working.
Right.
Then you have the part of a brain that's really firing around emotional pieces, right? And so part of the reason that you can't do like a math equation when you get in a car accident is that you're competing problems, right? You're in an emotional state. And for a person who's been has experienced complex trauma, like multiple traumas over time, or an event of his trauma, what it'll do is it'll just rupture that whole process. And so the brain has to continue to move forward, right? You see a stereotype of a soldier coming back from war who has experienced tremendous traumas, still needs to be able to go to the grocery store, still needs to be able to like wake up and brush his teeth and do stuff. So the prefrontal cortex is still working, but there's a deep-seated repression, right? There's the emotional pieces that they've experienced. There's no room for that. And so what eye movement desensitization reprocessing will do, again, broad strokes, is give the patient access to the emotional experience without the prefrontal cortex being taken over. Because as you're doing either bilateral stimulation with paddles or bilateral stimulation with your eyes, your prefrontal cortex is a little bit distracted.
Right.
Right. And so now you can, with the help of a therapist, get access.
So it's like talking while you're driving, right? Like kind of like,
That's a great point.
having your brain goes into free flow mode. You work with a lot of men, as we kind of mentioned. What is one thing, I'm sure there's a cavalcade of thing, but what is one thing that you see that men are truly struggling with? Because, you know, obviously you have like Scott Galloway on Oprah talking about the loneliness epidemic that we're all going through. And, you know, is it a matter of loneliness? Is it a cultural lack of maturity that kind of got entangled into our experience of growing up? Is it a generational thing? What are you coming up against?
So I've thought a lot about this. Purpose, service, privilege. I think that many of the men that I work with, who are usually ages 15 to 40, are struggling to know what their purpose in life is. That's not an unusual thing. If you go back to early philosophy, I think people have always been thinking of, you have Marcus Aurelius right there.
There's tons of, he's right next to you. There's Daily Stoic. There's tons of philosophy in this
This has
place.
been a question that's an age-old question, but I think it's magnified in today's day and age, given the fact that never before has life been so-called easier. So if we use the analogy of, I'm like kind of a fan of 1800s at old America, and you're like making your way across the country, right? As you're making your way across the country, you have this innate sense of purpose. At least I'm going to go build a life, right? I'm going to
Survival was purpose.
Correct. Right.
Right.
You had all this adversity that created a lot of purpose. Now we have, I think, is existential adversity. There's nothing like really clearly present in front of you and I right now that puts our life at risk or that puts our lifestyle in jeopardy. Like if you want food, go on your phone, order it. Right. If you want a coffee, it's right over there. Right. It's like, so these small little moments where historically we've been able to build through adversity, that adversity has been kind of wiped away. And so we've been still left with this larger question of purpose. So I think purpose is a vector.
And do you think that, I mean, it seemingly it is that an intrinsic question that is inevitable?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. No question.
So you can't avoid it. I guess that's the real point. You can't be a man or a woman.
Correct.
Right. I've made this point before, and I do believe that women, and this is not saying we don't have to add all the asterisks, but my point is that women are brought into this world, whether it happens or not, with the most biggest important purpose, which is cultivating and recreating human life and keeping the species going, right? There's an intrinsic purpose that women are brought onto this earth Whether they act on it or not, that's up to them, but there is a intrinsic purpose that you cannot deny is there, which is keeping the species going. Men play a role in that, but is not our sole purpose.
Right.
And not having that built-in intrinsic purpose is something now it's like, well, that's a discovery mission. Now you're on a journey to find your purpose, which, again, depending on where you're looking, you could find no purpose or purpose everywhere.
I love the word that you use in terms of discovery. I do think that we sort of lose sight of the fact that even for me or for you, it's still a journey, right? It's still a hero's journey of sorts.
Yeah, it's a quest.
It's a quest.
We're on a quest.
We're figuring it out.
Yeah.
And to me, that's beautiful. Like, that's kind of what it's all about. We should make space for that. We should sort of celebrate that rather than ask these 21-year-old men to make sure that they land a 6-figure salary right out of college. It's like, for what? You're going to be miserable? Like, so anyway, so purpose, we can talk more about purpose, but just kind of go through them. Service is another vector that I think I focus on because it's tied to purpose in the sense that I feel as though many men have lost sight of, the ones that I work with have lost sight of what does it mean to be in service to others as like a go-to way of feeling better about yourself. Not to say that it's a selfish act, and quite frankly, I think it's selfless, but it also satiates the direct need that you have, which is to make an impact. And it doesn't have to be a tremendous. Literally this morning at Starbucks, a woman was like balancing 16 cups of coffee as she walked to her car. And I was like, you want me to just grab one of those for you as you open the door? And she's like, yeah, that'd be helpful. It's like, okay, that's an act of service in a 5-second exchange, right? Like, we should be doing more of that, I think, as men. And then in terms of
why aren't men doing more of that?
Well, I think there's a variety of reasons. I think they've been scared into submission. They feel as though they don't want to be called out for being grimy or cringy. Cringy was the word I was thinking. Cringy or like threatening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to be sort of this distant posture of like, I'm not going to disrupt anything. This is a lot of the men that I see who are failure to launch populations, the guys who are struggling to get out from their parents' households. They're just scared to leave the nest. And we can talk more about failure to launch just conceptually because I think that's an important subject. But I think many men are just sort of scared to take that small leap out of fear of what that could cost them. And so they're, even if I can envision myself at like 15 being like meek about it, right? And if I was meek about it, maybe I would have gotten a different impression. But if I was more just like, hey, I'm just going to help you as a human being.
But that's the part of it, right? It's not about man or woman or any of that dynamic. It's about human to human. You are a human being with 16 coffees in your hand trying to get out of a Starbucks. I'm a human being who has no coffees in my hand. I'm in a position where I can provide you with some form of help. That's right. I should do that. And it goes as far as even just a small, simple compliment, right? If you say, like, if I see a guy with a great beard, I'm like, great beard, man. You know what I mean? That's right. Or whatever it may be, those small, simple human to human gestures of kindness is what really gets things going, right? And all of a sudden that feels good. That energetically feels good. And you obviously like, I want to do more of that. I'm a kinder person now. And now that person who might have spilled all that coffee and fucked up the day now is in a position that they feel better. Yeah. And now they can go, oh, you know, this guy at Starbucks opened up the door. It was so nice, blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps the good going.
So I couldn't agree with you more, not to go super, super macro here, but I think as Americans, we've lost our way in that. You know, when was the last time you spoke to your neighbors and did something nice for your neighbor kind of thing? Like, that to me is just a lost art. We're so like insular, right? We're like, take care of your family at all costs, right? But like, where's the community, right?
You know, it's funny. I'm sorry. My kids are just home for a week sick, and last couple of days we baked cookies, and my daughter packed. We have an elderly neighbor a couple doors down, and she's like, I packed some cookies for Ruth. I'm gonna go drop it off to her this week. And I'm like, I never even thought of that. Like, I'm so into like, you know what I mean? And I consider myself a pretty kind person. I think that's something that society strips away from us, because kids, to some degree, some kids are mother effers, but kids have that intrinsically. Like they want to do good. They want to be kind. And I do think society, and whether it be your parents or your school or your community, starts to kind of strip that away and you become a little bit more cynical.
Well, Western society.
Yes, yeah,
right. Like
when I say, right. What about here?
Capitalistic. Right. So I'm a big believer in capitalism. You and I both own companies.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So I'm not disparaging capitalism, and part of capitalistic philosophy and sort of like what's ingrained in you is that you have to just fend for yourself, right? So as you grow up through the school system in Connecticut, right, where I'm from, you're constantly rewarded for performance, constantly rewarded for individuality, right?
Yeah.
So over time, I think you lose sight, or you can lose sight of community. And so when we think about service to others, credit to your daughter for thinking about that, credit to anyone who's giving back to their community, credit to you for inviting me to your community. Right? Like that's something you didn't have to do, but it's a privilege to even be here and then have a chance to speak to your audience, because we're creating a community of men who can hear this and listen to it, and women as well. So that's part of what I think is happening. They're scared into submission. I think there's sort of an underbelly here of individualism that creates this inculcation where like we're just going to take care of our insular own rather than reach out to community. But I do agree with you. Kindness greases the wheels. And then the sort of the third pillar of privilege is I think there's just this feeling as though as a male, you're just entitled to like have these things figured out, or that like they're ready for you. Like, you know what your purpose is, you know what you should be doing. These are the things you should be.
Where's that entitlement coming from?
Could be a lot of things. I think I still think there's a degree to which like patriarchal philosophy sort of exists at times, where people just believe that men are entitled to have access to things that women aren't. I do think it's changing, but so just think about this from a psych perspective, evolutionary psychology perspective. The more and more marginalized you feel, the more like resentful you feel.
Sure.
So what do you do with that resentment, right? You can use it for good or for evil.
Sure.
Right? You can use forgiveness, or you can sort of act on it. I think what we're seeing broadly, again, is that a lot of men who feel like they're apart from, lack of purpose, lack of service to others, distant from communities, fending for themselves, are lashing out, right? And so they lash out almost in a weird way, like acting on their, like what they feel is a lack of privilege. Like, well, no one's paying attention to me. No one's actually giving me access. No one's giving me opportunities.
They act like babies.
Yeah.
They act like children.
Well, and
they throw a tantrum.
By the way, the unfortunate reality is tantrums at that level could include violence.
Of course. And often they do. That's the unfortunate part, right? When you're 6 years old, you know, like my son is, and he throws a tantrum, it's adorable, right? And it's laughable. But at what point do you, as a man, start to step into taking radical responsibility for your emotional state? And then how do you take responsibility for your life?
That's right. So I love the language you just used. I work with men in their 30s and 40s who still are struggling with this lesson. It's you're responsible for everything that happens to you. Right. Even if it's unfair, even if it's something you couldn't have predicted, right? Like, God forbid something happens to me today, you know, okay, I get in a car accident. Well, technically maybe that the other person hit me, but it's still my responsibility on how I handle that, right? How I respond to that event. I could lash out. I can make everyone's life around me miserable, or I can be measured, composed, open, thorough. You know, like these are things in my purview.
Yeah.
That I need to be able to do.
And that's so much easier on paper.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much easier for us to sit here and be like, well, you got to take responsibility for your life and all these things. It's like, yeah, that's great. But when you're in the throes of whatever it may be, and you do feel like the walls are closing in on you, it's so hard to kind of gain that perspective. Be like, all right, well, I'm in control over all this. And I may not be in control of this, but I can control how I feel or how I show up in the world. And again, in theory, that's all well and good. But in practicality, it's a very different experience.
Well, dude, that's why I have a job.
Right. That's why I have a business. Right.
So it's like, it's all hard.
Right.
Like, I could have a real conversation with you literally today. Like, it's not always easy taking responsibility.
Right.
I'm not saying it's easy.
Right.
I'm going through it every day. 6-month-old daughter, right? Like, all new stuff. You have 2 kids, kind of new stuff every day. It's like, this is not supposed to be easy. But it still doesn't detract from the fact that if you just think like you deserve it because you're the guy, right? It's like, no. You're a part of a team. You're a part of your family. You dictate how your family feels. This has been good language recently that I've heard. Like, how you walk into the door, you set the barometer for how the environment responds. Like, are you going to enter in with positive energy, composed energy, or are you going to make everyone on guard? Right? So these are things you can take a responsibility for, and it's not easy. You said before when we started the conversation, both are true. Yeah, both are true. It can be something that should be done and also something that's difficult.
Yeah, doing difficult things is definitely a way to do more difficult things, right? If you put yourself in difficult situations, and I think, your own difficult things, whether it be a CrossFit class, jiu-jitsu, cold plunge, sensory deprivation, sauna, whatever it is, healthy, difficult things allow you to have a larger capacity to do more difficult things when they're out of the vacuum of the difficult thing itself. So going to jiu-jitsu at 5 a.m, when I walk through that door, seemingly, or wherever door I walk through, the rest of the day is just that much easier because I don't have people trying to choke me, right? So, waking up and going to do CrossFit and you're, squat thrusting or clean and jerking, whatever amount of weight, the day is just that much easier because you ate the big frog first or whatever it is. Like you had an opportunity to test yourself and be under stress, which we could talk about that in a whole different, side conversation. But, the stress of it now allows you to free up energy to show up in a way that's healthier.
So you probably saw, or probably many of your viewers saw this, the Huberman-Goggins conversation, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex.
Yes.
The part of the brain that literally develops when you do hard stuff. It's kind of makes sense, right? As you do a hard thing, you become more accustomed to being able to take on increased volume, increased capacity for difficulty. We call this psychology's distress tolerance, right? The ability to handle distress over time, the ability to overcome adversity. If you were to encapsulate performance psychology, it's the ability to think flexibly around challenges and see them as opportunities. It's a huge part of what we talk about in our work when we work with high performers as well. And of course, I'm a big believer in modeling that at our practice. Everyone who's on staff is a high performer, either a D1 athlete or professional in some kind. I'm a coach. I've been operating professionally in the athletic space for a while, or not professionally, but at a high level. So, okay, we can model that and we can still make space for the fact that it's difficult. I think the other sort of unattended to or overlooked component is, what does it mean to do hard things relationally? And so the call to action would be, come to Agora Social Club or come to Valiance and develop that part of the thing that you're not developed, right? A lot of men will say, well, the gym's my therapy, bro. It's like, yeah, same, right? But I also have access.
Only for so long. Only for so long.
I have access to people and conversations and supportive figures and mentors and groups of men where I can feel supported on a 3-dimensional level. So yeah, it's great, but I also don't think it's the only thing, right? And I think we can try to create space for all of it. I think where you and I both share some interest is creating spaces where you can do all of it, right? You can have the deep conversation, not be marred down by all the emotionality, and then just go do something really hard and like, let's say, physical. But then you can do both, right? The 3-dimensionality is important, like the development of the full self.
Yeah. The physical, again, the physical is huge, but again, it only will, for me, personally speaking, it only lasts for so long, right? There gets a point where that stuff works still, right? It just, if it was doing 60% of the work, awesome, but all of a sudden that 60% becomes 40 or 20. And it's important to also be able to manage yourself, because in that physical endeavor, unless you are, and even like top level athletes, right? There's going to be seasons of your life where things are going to change. Like right now, I'm in a season of my life. It's like I do jiu-jitsu 3 days a week. That's my physical fitness, right? Not going to CrossFit, not working out, my diet's kind of all over the place. I have a good baseline. Thank God I've established something where I'm like, all right, this is my bottom and I won't go below this. But my kids got sick for a week, right? things are going to get thrown at you. So if you are so rigid with, I have to go do this, and maybe that's the David Goggins world, and that's the elite, and maybe that's just not how I don't know. I don't know. It's something I definitely struggle with, but I also give myself that grace and flexibility, be like, this is just life right now. Like, this is the season of my life where I'm not in the best. My son the other day was like, Dad, you're starting to look like Santa. You're getting gray in your beard and you're getting a belly. I was like, Daddy used to have a six pack. What do you want me to tell you? Like, I could still choke the shit out of you, kid. So like, but this is the season of life that I'm in, right? And if this is my Santa Claus season, then so be it, right? Like, call me Santa.
So look, there's what you're describing, I think, is super important, and more people should know this. I'm going through this myself. Like, I used to train extraordinarily hard in CrossFit. I'm transitioning to endurance work. I'm going to be doing many more triathlons, aiming for Ironman type stuff. So, okay, it's difficult to make that transition, but it's also difficult to be obsessed. And when you're talking about the David Goggins of the world, right? I always talk about, like, I sort of joke, I think David would be like the hardest person to have a beer with, because he just would just not chill. He just doesn't.
Right.
He does not know how to chill out. Right. So for the right person, for the right time, I'm sure he's exceptional, and he's motivated me in times where I've needed to have that kind of motivation. But there is a price to everything, and the price of being obsessed is that there's a cost to your relationships, and there's a cost to your ability to relax.
Right.
So I think, look, for you and I, maybe it sounds like we're in a similar place in our life. It's, yes, physical fitness is extraordinarily important. I'm not compromising it. I do have a baseline sort of floor as well. And it can't be everything. And I have to be, it's actually fragility to crumble when it doesn't go perfect, right? If I didn't get, say, for example, hey, I got to work out 5 days a week, got to be training 2 hours a day. And I don't get that. And I mentally crumble, and I'm a terrible human being with my wife, and I'm a terrible human being with my friends because I'm miserable that I didn't hit my benchmark. Well, the cost of that makes me fragile. So I would rather move to an anti-fragile, flexible mindset that says, look, here's my base level floor. Any level of activity that I can get in within this time domain is a success. Let's just try to do that. Let's try to make that work. And even if it doesn't work, my best today is the best that I can do.
Right.
So it's like relative to where you are. If you're sick, you're not going to have your best workout. But if you still sweat a little bit, then that's still your best for that day, right? It doesn't have to be perfect every single time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know the ideal version and to experience the ideal version. Like, I've had my moments where, like, CrossFit 3 days, doubles, going to CrossFit at 5 and then jiu-jitsu at 6:15 in the morning, back to back. And like, I've experienced that. And I think it's so wonderful to have that, because you now have this tangible experience that you could pull from and say, I'm not this guy, but I'm also not that guy. Like, I'm not as bad as I am, but I'm not as good as I am either. I'm somewhere in the middle. I was actually just recently on a podcast, and I was talking to it was myself and a buddy of mine, and I was talking about this a little bit. He's like, oh, that's next level. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, that's the next level. Like that, like the acceptance piece, the saying, like, I accept that this is, I was like, I look at it the opposite. I think I'm failing miserably. He's like, no, dude, like, and I never really looked at it that way. He's like, that's next level shit right there.
So two things that you said are brilliant. So this idea that I think I had heard this from Scott Galloway as well, and I talk a lot about this with my 20-somethings. You should know your max capacity and your worst self.
Yeah.
In your 20s. So I know what it feels like to be hungover for 3 days straight, a complete piece of shit.
Right.
Eating pizza, eating fried food, not sleeping a wink, getting fucked up.
Right.
I know what that feels like, and I know what it feels like to work 80-hour weeks, to train my fucking ass off, to be strong, to be fit, and to be like sort of performing at an elite level. So now I have these poles that I can draw from and say, okay, cool. Now what do I want my life to look like? I'm 36 years old. So now what do I want my life to look like in my 30s? I can kind of hone it in. So that's the first part that you said, which I totally agree with. I think is brilliant. And I also agree with you that the hardest part that so many people struggle with, and you sort of spoke to this, other people view that as next level, but it doesn't make it easy for you.
No.
Right? It's
the opposite.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. But part of what we're trying to do in the conversations that we're having at Valiance is, with high performers, they're constantly coming in with this same sort of perspective. It's like, look, my environment around me is telling me I got to move 1,000 miles an hour. I have to make a certain amount of money. It's got to be this way. It's got to be this way. It's got to be this way. I work with guys who are graduating college, have to get a job, applied to 100 positions in New York City, in Boston, in the local area to try to get a perfect job. Okay, let's get back to the first P, purpose. For what?
Mm.
For what? Because if you really were clear on what you want in your life, it probably all comes back to sort of the Mexican fisherman, which I'm sure you know.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It's like, it all comes back to a simpler, more value-laden idea of what life means. I think kids do a great job in making that clear for you.
Yeah.
Of what it is that actually matters. And so, yeah, I think, yes, people will view what you're doing as next level, but it's only because for them, they're caught in this rat race still. When you're actually at the level of adjusting and seeing your life in seasons and thinking flexibly, it's no less difficult. It's just a different challenge.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that I used to say this a lot, and I still say it now, we'll figure it out. And in high school, everyone was like, oh, what are we doing Friday? I'm like, we'll figure it out. And they were like, come on, like I would get mocked for it. But especially now in opening a business and fatherhood, being a husband, everything, we'll figure it out is probably one of the most powerful things that I say on an everyday basis in all different areas of my life. We'll figure it out because it's still firm that the problem or whatever it is going to get solved, but I don't know the way and I don't know the answer. And there is this submission to things that are outside of my control, but also this control of I will control what I can because I will figure it out. I just don't know how yet.
So smart. I think a lot of young men struggle with this. You're talking about it sort of definitionally, confidence.
Yeah.
Right? Confidence in Latin is with trust. So do you have the trust in yourself?
But you also have to have a pool of experiences to pull from to say, oh, I have figured it out before.
That's correct.
Maybe not perfectly, but I have gotten the result in some way, shape, or form that now validates my ability to say, we'll figure it out.
That's correct. And I think a lot of guys that struggle with confidence will tell you like, well, I've gotten tons of losses, right? So like, how do I have any confidence? Like I have no confidence because every single time I've tried it, it's never really worked. And so what you've described, which is sort of what we try to work on as well, is how they actually view the next opportunity through a lens of controlling what they can control. So if you use the analogy of sports, right? If you're a baseball player and you've gotten 2 strikes, so you're 0-2 in the count, right? Are those 2 strikes failures, or are those opportunities for you to then learn how to get the next pitch correct, right? And so I think a lot of young men will create a narrative around their losses as like, well, it's great that Vinny can figure it out, right? But I can't figure it out. I've fucked it up 1,000 times over, right? So how am I supposed to figure it out? Well, the narrative is not that you fucked it up. It's that you made decisions that didn't go the way that you wanted them to do. Can you be objective and non-emotional in your
That's the key part.
in your vantage point on that and say, look, what can you take from that experience and then build on the next one? So it's what I try to work out of is this learned helplessness where you get sort of this constant feedback that you're not enough, you're not doing enough, so just give up. Why try? And people are like talked about scared into submission or bowing out of the process, failure launch populations. I'm just going to stay at home. It's safer here. But that is associated with a narrative, I think, that says those failures are a part of your identity. And we want to, I think, divorce that kind of understanding and say, look, those failures are actually just learning opportunities, the kind of Kobe Bryant type language. There is no such thing as failure. It's all learning. Can we get that narrative superimposed on those decisions and say, if you were to objectively view the tape, you're a football player, you watch the tape back. It's like, yeah, that was bad per se, but what can you do to check and make it better the next time? And that's where I think your confidence comes in. You do it, you figure it out, you make mistakes along the way, you iterate. You're like, well, the next time I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and the next time I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and you just get better.
Yeah. I would never look at it as confidence, but thank you. I'll receive that compliment. I would never have framed it as confidence. It's just the way my brain has to operate because
You have trust in yourself, though.
yeah, I guess so. I suppose I do. And more recently, I think my trust has been in something bigger than myself. I now call it God. I'm very comfortable calling it God, but for a long time, I probably would have called it the universe or the force because I'm a Star Wars nerd or source or something. But my confidence more recently has been in that something bigger than myself has a much bigger plan for me than I could ever imagine. And I allow that to guide me in a way that experientially, and you kind of spoke about it a little bit before, in doing the group, I felt something, one of the early groups I did, that was going through my chest. I call it the golden thread, and I've done the, Carl Jung golden shadow and all that stuff. But it was only in hindsight that I figured out, oh, this is something bigger than me, right? Like I went home and told my wife, like, I feel so fulfilled. I feel purpose. I didn't have the word, but I said, I feel like I had a Thanksgiving dinner. I feel so fulfilled right now. I can't even put it into words. And that is what I'm going after in my life. Didn't have the words, didn't have any frame of reference to pull from, but that feeling is what I'm going after right now. And inevitably it's led me here and purposeful, but a knowing that I was able to tap into something outside of myself has been super important.
Welcome to Agora Social Club, the Westchester's hub for guys to gather, connect, and unwind. In the last 6 years, I've been facilitating a men's group called the Council of Dudes. And within that 6 years, I realized that guys need a place where they can get together, connect, and build community. A place that's not the gym, that's not jujitsu, that's not the bar, but a place where guys can come with no ego and grow and develop together. So here we have our chess table. We're gonna be having monthly chess lessons and our take a book, leave a book library. Some of these I've read, some of these I haven't. Quantum physics to personal development to fiction. We also have our record player area. In the last few years, I've become very obsessed with jazz music. And if you don't know how to play a vinyl, no big deal. It hooks up to your phone via Bluetooth. We have artwork from California to local artists. We have these small little work tables, so if you want to hang on the couch and get some work done, you can just come pop them open. And we also have our little workspace here with quotes from Muhammad Ali, Albert Einstein, Theodore Roosevelt. We also have our coffee bar, small fridge, and more quotes and artwork over the wall. Head on over to agorasocialclub.com, sign up for our free 7-day trial, and with that, you will get a key fob. Scan your key fob, and you have access to this space from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. So if you're a guy in the Westchester area and you're looking to gather, connect, and unwind with like-minded men, head on over to agorasocialclub.com.
So you just combine the P and the S, right? So like
Right.
actually all three, PSP, right? So you found purpose, which gives you fulfillment. Your purpose is tied to something more than yourself. So you deprivilege yourself in a way, if that's even a word. You've sort of put yourself on this equilibrium that you're all here to try to make a difference. And as soon as you do that, you cannot be stopped.
Yeah.
No one will stop you
Yeah.
because the clarity that you have,
It's insane.
it's insane. And
It's
now
insane.
it doesn't mean that you know exactly what tomorrow will look like. Right?
No idea.
As a business,
Zero idea.
as a business owner, we're having this conversation December before Christmas. So we're entering into 2026. We're thinking about, what is the next year going to look like? What are my quarterly goals? How do I get my team to a place where I want them to be? How do I develop a business that's sustainable long-term? Where do I want my family to be? We're asking really big questions that I think every one of us should be asking at a certain level. It doesn't make it easy. But when you have clarity in purpose, clarity in vision, clarity in who it is that you want to be, your identity, it's almost as if it's going to just work itself out, right? Because you're so dedicated and so committed. And that gift is so hard to find sometimes. I don't know, obviously you're speaking to it as a relatively recent process. I think in your 20s, you used that word discovery from before, which I love. I don't actually think it's fair to ask a 24-year-old to have that figured out.
Dude, I'm 41. I'm a completely different human being
That's correct.
than I was at 31, 21, like completely. But at the same time, if I look back, there have always been these nods, right? Like you were saying it before, like my minor was psychology. I always liked philosophy. Like I wanted to be on the radio. So all of these small little things have been happening throughout the course of time. I just didn't have the framework or the lens or the mentors or the community or the space to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. What do I do with all of this, right? And that's where like what you're doing, or groups like this, right? It brings that insight and perspective to life where you could say, okay, all right, that kind of makes sense now.
That's right.
But it's only through the conversations and through community and finding, like, we do a dad's group here. We have a dad who has 2 kids that are in college. We have a guy who has a brand new baby. Mine are, 10 and 6. So, and a bunch of different ages that come in. It all lends itself to saying, I went through that. May not be exactly that, but in this little rooted emotional level, it's that. It may be expressed in this different way, but it's still that. And when you could recognize that other people have experienced, that you experience, it's almost our humanistic duty to open the door for the person with 8 coffees. It would be insane not to do that. If I know that as a father, I went through this thing, it'd be insane for me not to give that insight and perspective. You'd have to be a lunatic or a serial killer, right? To not be like, hey man, I went through that. This is what I did. This is how I handle it. Not sure if it's good or not, but this is what happened. And it just gives someone a little bit of like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not alone.
How do you do that outside of here? How do you create that opening?
I think just showing up authentically, I opening the door for people. You know, I think with the allowing my kids and my family to see the vulnerable side of me, right? Whether it be crying, I cried everything. Like that's the joke. I was in a store. My son the other day, Little Drum. I cried the Little Drummer Boy all the time. It's like the best Christmas song. And he's like, "Are you gonna start crying?" Like almost like jabbing me. I was like, "Yeah, I might start crying right here." Right? And he's like, "Okay." Right?
Yeah.
But allowing just expressing that, really just allowing that to be seen and heard and articulated, whether it be in the group or outside in the world, knowing that I don't have it all figured out, but I'm doing my best to try.
Yeah, that's so powerful. It's like the word comes to me as permission,
Yeah.
right? You give your kids in this instance permission to see you in that way.
Yeah.
And
But it's really about giving yourself the permission, right? You have to give yourself the permission. And, you know, we talked a lot about purpose, but I think that's something that, you know, if you ask me at 25 or 30, whatever it was, we allocate purpose to all these external things, jobs, even family. Like my purpose is my children. Yes, they are one of the biggest. My purpose is my wife. The purpose is this. All wonderful external reasons to have purpose. But what's like your internal purpose? And then how do you find that?
So this is a lot of the work that we do. A lot of values identification, work around leaning the ladders against the right walls, making sure that you're climbing the right ladders and you're going to the way that you want to be going. Frankly, this is a work in progress for me as well, right? I don't want to come across as though I'm on a pedestal preaching like I got to figure it out, right? I'm in a studio with you away from my family. You're here with me away from your family. I think a lot of men are making that compromise at even a grander scale. Working, not at home, traveling, not at home. And you have to do the mental gymnastics of like, well, okay, I identify as a provider. I value my family. Is this the way that I can show up for my family the best? And then you kind of like run that through. It's like, is this a rationalization or is this real? So it's always a calculus, right? It's always figuring it out. I think the job of all of us is, whether it's in the context of working with us at Valiance or in the context of working with Agora through a social connection, it's to just be evaluative with oneself at time to time, right? It's not to, you don't want to get caught being a sheep, just following along day to day, doing the same stuff and not checking in with yourself. So yeah, of course, I've made the decision that today is the right day to meet with Vinny and have the podcast and talk about the businesses and get into this kind of work. And it's at the cost of maybe being with my family, but I've kind of worked it through with my family in such a way where it makes sense. And it's not something, I'm not going to come back here tomorrow and do the same thing. You know? Right. So
you're more than welcome.
I'll talk to my wife. So yeah, it's like the idea is we're making decisions all the time. Let's just make sure that those decisions are in line with the person that we're wanting to become. And you can change them. You talked a lot. I'm certainly not the same person at 24 that I am today, right? It's okay.
I like how you only had to go back 2. 1, I went back 2.
Well, I'm 36. 24, that's a little way.
You still went back 1. I went back 2. I was like 31, 21.
So the changes are normal. Life is all about adaptation. Can you adapt to the new person you're wanting to become? And can you have the vision for who it is that you want to be? Every day that you live, you're depositing the kinds of behaviors that's going to get you to the person that you want to become. So to be really like X's and O's and tangible and tactical, a lot of the work that we'll do, especially with high performers, is being really, really clear around what matters, what do you value, and how do we tie actions to those values? Can we codify it? Can we operationally define it? If you say you're a family guy, that's a throwaway. Everyone's valuing family. What do you do? How do you know? Are you actually valuing family? How do you know? How would I know? right? If I looked at you and I said, look, Vinny, you got to do this or that, what decision would you make that would then lead me to believe that you're valuing family? And when we put it in a behavioral context, now I can actually tell. And if you do that I like to do this just the way I do it in my brain. My brain works like sort of a business, so I do it on 90-day cycles. If I do like a 90-day check-in point and then a 90-day check-in point with my wife, she'll laugh at me. We'll do sort of quarterly meetings and we'll talk about relationship, but also talk about finances and get into it a little bit. But we run it a little bit like a family. Are we trending in the right direction? Right? Okay. Are we moving in the right direction as individuals, as a family? And then can we adjust? So the values that she and I had, 10 years ago, probably similar values, but the way we're operationally defining it through our behaviors is probably a little bit different now, in fairness.
Sure.
And that's what I would suggest is you just continually have the grace and the space and the time to dedicate towards self-reflection to make sure that you're trending in the right direction. There's a great worksheet, by the way. If you just go to Brene Brown values list on Google, there's like 100 values. If you don't I don't know what the values to start, just do that. It's
okay.
It's really straight.
Yeah, that's a good practical tool. So I think for me, it's more about energetic ROI. Like what has the biggest return on my energy, right? And if it's an energetic vampire, then I have to just be aware of that. And then really look at when opportunities or things or God provides me with something that's going to off-ramp me from that energetic vampire, right? And whether that be people, jobs, whatever it is, if there's no return, I do my best to not give it the energy that it's asking me to give it, because there's no return on it. Like it just doesn't need, I don't have the capacity at this stage to give my energy towards something that isn't going to be moving me towards the person and the family dynamic and everything that I see as possible and I know is possible. If it's not in alignment with that, I can't even really give it that much thought or attention.
So it sounds like you value energy.
100 freedom.
There you go.
Freedom.
So then for you, right, if you would circle freedom,
yeah,
and then we would have that discussion. It's like, well, how do I know?
Right.
Well, you would say, look, I've come up with this heuristic. There's vampires,
right,
and then there's energy givers. My wife talked to an employee once and said, fountains, faucets, or drains.
Yeah.
Okay. So fountains, faucets, or drains, where does that exist on that spectrum? And if you're paying attention to people in your life who are drains, you know what you're going to get in return.
Right.
I feel exhausted. I spoke to a client this morning, really difficult workplace, draining. And so the ability to stay present, the ability to take care of oneself, the ability to show up relationally the way they want to, not able to be done because they're drawing from an empty well.
Right.
And so it makes sense to me why freedom equates to energy.
Of course. Yeah. It's the ultimate energy, right? It's being able to be, and really just a matter of freedom is just showing up in a way of authenticity to me, right? That's the way I look at it. Freedom is just this ultimate way of being authentic to the self, right? Because you are able to explore the world and explore yourself and learn.
Well, it takes a lot of work to get there. I also value
yeah.
no shit because I own a business too.
Right.
So it's the ability to do what you want, how you want, when you want, with whoever you want, however you want.
Right.
Okay. So it takes a little while to get there, right? And so I think, again, kind of talking about the zeitgeist of today and why I think a lot of men maybe are challenged by this is they feel as though they need to enter into freedom like now.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of this is like, okay, well, that's possible, but it comes at a cost. If you don't do the work that Vinny and Justin did to get to a place where they can actually execute on freedom, you're skipping steps a little bit, right?
Sure.
I don't know enough about your work history to know, but I'll speak specifically to me. I kind of had to pay my dues. I kind of had to do things that sucked. You talked about the clinical aspect of becoming a therapist. 3,000 hours of work, postgraduate, plus 100 hours of supervision, plus, right? Getting experience in the field. So it doesn't happen overnight. You got to think in decades. I was on a podcast and they said, like, what's the biggest thing that you wish you would have learned or you could tell yourself, or the biggest takeaway? And I said, think about your life as if you're writing a biography. No one talks about December 17th, what happened on that day. They talk about 5-year time horizons of Justin or 10-year time horizons of Justin. It's the becoming, the discovery of oneself. So when you get to that, it's like you eventually get to freedom. But if you're 21 and you want freedom, yeah, you can try to become an influencer. It's going to be rife with a lot of pain because you have no real skill. right? And you're going to be learning on the fly. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be ready for the cost. And there's a cost of both sides. You got to work for the man for a little bit. There's a cost too.
Yeah.
But if that's where the eventual person that you're wanting to become, is that cost worth paying?
Right.
Everything has a cost.
Everything has a suck. Everything has a suck. It's a matter of where you want to allocate that suck to, right?
Choose your regret.
Yeah.
Williamson, like I graduated from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington with my bachelor's in social work. At 21 years old, I could have sworn I would live in Wilmington for the rest of my life. Loved it down there. I was by the beach. Everything was amazing. I was 21. I was like, I don't know about graduate school, but then I did the calculus. So like, well, if I live down here and I don't go to graduate school, I'm staring at a $35,000 salary and not close to my family. If I go to graduate school, I have potentially unlimited upside depending on how it goes. My family lives in Connecticut. What do I value at 21? And so I make a decision. I go to University of Connecticut, graduate from their master's program in a year, go on to build a business, meet my wife, rest is history. But I chose the regret. I had to make a decision, and I chose something that I felt like was valuable to me at that time. Given the knowledge that I had, I can kind of forgive myself back, right? And it's okay. It's like, that's the decision I chose to pay. There's a cost to that decision, but I think the outcome was well worth it because I'm able to be here, an hour away. I live from here, my family's from here. I got my friends here, my wife here. I've developed a life, and I can live with that regret. I think a lot. If you and I could live forever, we could live 4 different lives.
Oh yeah,
but we have one.
Yeah,
so you got to just choose.
And you could tie in quantum physics in there and live multiple lives all at once. If people want to get your services, I feel like we could talk about this all day. I mean, we keep on going.
Appreciate you.
If people wanted to connect with you, find out more, where can they connect with you? Where can they look at your work and get some services?
Yeah, so Valiance Counseling and Coaching.com. We're based in Milford, so if you type in Valiance Milford, it'll pop up in Google, no problem. If you go on our website, you'll learn more about our services. We work with men and women, emerging adults, and professionals through periods of developmental challenges, changes in their lifestyle, as I mentioned before, high school to college, postgrad to life in general. High performers, failure launch, that's our specialty, men and women. I see men too. So that's our business. For me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Carotti. We could probably put a link in. And then I also have a weekly newsletter, 1% Better.
Which is very good, by the way.
Thank you so much.
I enjoy it.
You can subscribe by going onto the website or going to 1% Better on Kit, and you'll find it that way.
Excellent. Thank you so much for doing this. We'll have to do it again.
Let's do it, dude. Let's do it.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow, right?
Sounds great. So check out our wife.